And it's recording now.
Very cool. All right, everybody. Thanks for reconvening. It's good to have so many names on the participant list. And thanks, Gina. I know you're having a busy day, so thanks for popping on. I really appreciate it. We're going to continue the discussion. We had two really good conversations, one about relationships and about resources in the MENA context, and then we moved into the story of this phenomenal entrepreneur in Albuquerque. And now we're going to talk about these institutional forces that make New Mexico an exporter, and to talk about trade and the trade environment in New Mexico. And for that, we're very lucky to have both Randy Trask and Celeste Nunez from the New Mexico Trade Alliance. They are going to talk to us about New Mexico's trade environment, and in that conversation is trade destiny. So again, we're recording. We are live and recording, and we're also the chat option is open and available, so please feel free to queue up with your questions in the chat bar. So it's my pleasure to introduce a friend of mine. Randy has been a close ally since I started working here at UNM, and we work on lots of things in the community, but Randy Trask is the Executive Director of the New Mexico Trade Alliance. Celeste Nunez was a former student of mine and works with the Trade Alliance now. So this is in many ways a family. So thank you, Randy. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Manuel. Happy to be with everybody today. You guys are super, super fortunate to have Dr. Montoya as a professor under this program. I imagine all of you already have figured that out. Also happy to see my friends at Global Ties over here. If you guys came back early and saw us chatting it up, the various international organizations are pretty close throughout the state. So we coordinate and try and work together as much as we can. I'll introduce myself really quickly, but first maybe Celeste, did you want to introduce yourself and your role with the Trade Alliance?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Celeste Nunez, and like Dr. Montoya mentioned, I used to be one of his students. I graduated from the University of New Mexico Anderson School of Management a year ago in 2019, and I studied business administration. That's when I actually started interning with Randy, and from there I was able to start my own company and become a consultant to the New Mexico Trade Alliance, as well to the City of Albuquerque Economic Development Department. With Randy, I worked on the Albuquerque, Chihuahua City Bilateral Commission. It was an agreement between Albuquerque City and the Chihuahua City to formalize their economic and cultural and ties. So I work with Randy Trask, and I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome, and Celeste has been doing an awesome job handling the marketing right now for us, especially as we are now in marketing mode only, surviving off of webinars and everything else, but what we originally signed up for in working in international business, which was supposed to be lots of travel, which isn't happening anymore. I imagine you guys probably had your trip canceled. Is that right, Dr. Montoya? Oh, yeah, that sucks. That's like one of the main perks of paying for the EMBA program. But anyways, my background is also here in New Mexico. I'm an MBA grad from the University of New Mexico from Anderson, in international management as well as financial management. Since then have kind of pursued a career in international trade, which is kind of the government side of international business. So working with companies through government funded programs in an area called export assistance, doing everything we can to try and encourage and help more local companies to export their products and services. Have worked as a city employee, worked at the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Albuquerque Chamber. Eventually worked at the state as the head of what was called the Office of Mexican Affairs and Trade under Governor Richardson, managing everything from trade to border healthcare issues, everything that fell under a state having a relationship with a foreign entity directly across sharing a border. After that, about almost 10 years ago, we started the Trade Alliance, and now we have kind of emerged as the main nonprofit export assistance program in the state. We're supported and funded by both the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, as well as the U.S. Air Force now in Albuquerque for some other types of economic development projects. So with that, do I have screen sharing permission, Dr.
You do.
Montoya?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Make sure I have this going. So I'll give you something else to stare at so that you don't have to stare at my face the whole time. Let me know when you can see it.
Not yet.
Can see something, but it's not, it's just kind of a black screen.
There it is.
There we go.
Sometimes it takes a second. Okay. Okay, great. I'm gonna move this. Okay, so a little bit about the New Mexico Trade Alliance. As I mentioned, we are primarily an export assistance program. Everything that we do, particularly with the city and the county, is to try and encourage exports out of New Mexico. We do that in several different ways, starting from the very most simple interactions with companies, which would be through educational opportunities. So we organize or participate in seminars, now webinars, throughout the year, touching on a variety of different international business topics. So it could be anything from doing business 101 in a certain market, doing business in Mexico 101, to aspects of international trade, international e-commerce 101 for companies that are e-commerce based and maybe finding their first customers internationally, and how does that change what a regular domestic e-commerce business would look like, to even sometimes things as complicated as ITAR compliance, the federal government's restrictions on what companies are allowed to sell to other countries if there could be a reason why it might not be in the interest of Homeland Security. That's a particular issue, as you can imagine, for New Mexico defense contractors, which we have a lot in Albuquerque. We also do a lot of problem solving with companies. Usually we interact with companies for the first time because they have had something go wrong and they're looking for help to try and figure out how to solve it. A lot of times companies don't instinctively look for resources unless it's because something has gone wrong. So it could be anything from, I have a shipping container of stuff that I'm bringing in from China that the FDA has confiscated at the port, and we've done everything that they said we had to do, but they still won't release it. Like, how can we get it out? We have customers waiting. Recently we had a small tech company that sold a piece to a big telescope to the Australian government, and it was like a $50,000 piece, but something that was small enough that they could carry themselves, and they wanted to install it, so they were going to carry that piece with them on the plane to Australia and help install and show the government how to use it. Well, the question was, well, what kind of export documentation do I need, if any, if I'm going to hand carry a $50,000 export with me personally to deliver to a customer abroad? So a whole variety of different questions, things that pop up when you're having when you're doing international business. And then after engaging and developing relationships with local companies, either through the seminars or through helping them resolve issues that they have, we hopefully can get to a point where we can actually help them directly in finding customers, partners, distributors in foreign markets. That occurs through several different ways. One, we have partnerships with state and federal governments that have resources that are allocated to help subsidize international business development expenses. I know many of you, or most of you, or all of you are already in your careers, work for different types of companies. So keep this in the back of your mind, because you might be able to bring resources to the table to your company. But there's grant money available to pay for things like a New Mexico company's booth at an international trade show, or to translate your promotional materials, or your website, things like that, as I had mentioned, to try and encourage more exports coming from the state. That also includes covering business matchmaking services. So basically, any country in the world where the US is allowed to do business, the embassies and in larger countries, embassies and network of US consulates have US commercial service officers that work to help identify opportunities and customers for US companies. So we can, in any market, a company that feels comfortable pursuing a certain market, we can connect them to the embassy. They can engage in some matchmaking, and we can also cover the cost that the federal government charges for those services. We also will take it one step further for those companies who haven't necessarily done a lot of international business before, maybe haven't even left the country, or haven't traveled internationally much. We'll organize trade missions, and that's where we coordinate almost everything. So a lot of times it'll take place in conjunction with a foreign trade show. So the one example I like to use is Food and Hotel Asia in Singapore. We've taken several companies to that show, including, you had Via Miriam on, didn't you, Dr. Montoya, as part of this agenda?
We had Juan, yes.
Juan, yeah. So including Juan. Juan has been on a trade mission with us to that particular trade show in Singapore. And for a show like that, we'll do everything from organize a New Mexico pavilion to coordinating with the trade show to set up the booth spaces for the companies, to working with the companies to get their logos and imagery, and getting it to the marketing staff at the trade show to try and to get the booth prepared. Even down to consolidating all of the samples, in this case of food companies, for a shipment out to the show so that the samples are there before the show starts. Government rates at the hotels, helping coordinate airfare, hiring translators if necessary, and booth assistants for the show. Everything that we can possibly do so that when the company gets there, their sole focus is to try and do business. A lot of times we have companies or individuals, because they haven't traveled internationally very much, they end up in such culture shock abroad that they lose sight of the opportunities that are in front of them. So we try and create as much structure as we can so that they can just concentrate on getting down to business. Dr. Montoya, I can't see questions or things like that, and typically we do this as kind of an interactive conversation. So if you interrupt me whenever, if there's something that I should elaborate on, or a question or anything like that.
You got it. I'll keep monitoring the chat.
We also have an office in Mexico City, which is actually a partnership with the University of New Mexico and Central New Mexico Community College. Actually, I need to update this logo. The state currently is not one of the partners in that office, but UNM and CNM are. It's called the New Mexico Trade and Higher Education Center of Mexico City. We manage the trade office. We have a person that's full-time there that helps our companies enter the Mexican market. And then there's another person that works for UNM and CNM, which helps create opportunities between the university here and universities over there. Sometimes certificate programs here at this university, the facilitation of the exchange of students between Mexican universities and UNM, that kind of stuff. And that office on the trade side is especially helpful because when we do what I had mentioned earlier through the embassies around the world, it's really us handing our companies off, and they have to be really prepared. They get a list of leads, and then they have to pursue them themselves. Whereas our office in Mexico City is our office, so we can provide a much higher level of customer service. So that office will do anything from, a local company has somebody reach out to them from Mexico that says they're interested in their product and they would want to be their distributor in Mexico, Margot Galvan, who's our trade rep down there, will help them do some research on that distributor, check and see if there's any red flags, if there's any government liens against them, check their customers that they say that they have and make sure that those are actual customers and that they're happy. Maybe even go as far as to see, well, if there's interest in Mexico, that's great. Maybe there's other distributors that might be a better fit. So let's make sure that we explore all options. And then, of course, beyond that, she'll do the matchmaking, identify leads for local customers or local companies. And then at the point that you're ready to go down to Mexico, she'll prepare your agenda, she'll translate at meetings for you, and then she'll help you up with the follow-up afterwards. All of this stuff that we provide, including the office in Mexico City, is all subsidized by local government. So they're all services that are free of charge to local companies. So now getting into the trade conversation a little bit.
Before we go there, Randy, we got one question.
Sure.
From Catherine, do you offer any cultural training for entrepreneurs or companies to better understand the country culture to which they're exporting?
Yeah, great question. So when we do seminars on doing business in certain countries, there's always a cultural component to it. That always ends up being one of the favorite parts of that presentation for the companies that participate. But typically not more than a section on the kind of the general doing business in that market. When we take countries to ourselves directly to a foreign market, we actually do a briefing beforehand where we have a serious conversation about cultural differences and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and tipping, and as you could imagine, depending on the level of distance between our cultures and theirs, those conversations can get pretty detailed and intense. But yeah, it's a great question, and something that's absolutely necessary, because if you do not, you assume that people can behave themselves when they're abroad, and that is not always the case. So that has absolutely been a necessary part of what we do when we take companies abroad. So why does trade matter? It's kind of a silly question to ask, because the answer is on the screen in front of you. But if you look at economic development programs, government-focused assistance for businesses, there are things like low-interest loans. There's a lot of things that you can pay for matchmaking. There's different things that you can do, but in most aspects, there isn't free money on the table that the government will give you to try and encourage you to do business, with the exception of international trade. And why is that? It's hard. I wonder if, is there any way to make this interactive, Dr. Montoya? Are folks allowed to turn on their mics and talk?
Yeah, please, by all means. Anybody who wants to go out, yeah, everybody has access.
So why would you think that international trade is of such importance to the economic development, not only of the country, but that states care and even cities care?
We want to increase exports so that we can reduce our trade deficit.
Okay, and why does that matter?
We import more than we export, and so our GDP is less than it could be.
Okay, exactly. So GDP is basically the size of your economy, right? And so if you are exporting, you are bringing money from outside of the country into the country, meaning that you're growing the economy of the country, right? Well, it works the same way at the state level, even down to the city level. At the city level, if you have two retailers and they have their employees, and those employees make their paycheck and they go over and they shop at each other's stores, that's great. That's good for both of those businesses to be able to survive. But all you're doing is shifting the same money in the same economy. So the goal is to grow your economy, your local economy. You have to sell outside of your local economy. So in the case of New Mexico, if you sell to Arizona, that's a win for New Mexico. If you sell to Mexico, it's not only a win for New Mexico, it's a win for the country. So a lot of money is invested in trying to get companies to a level of sophistication where they can export. Additionally, it is a gigantic world, and if you are at a point where you can successfully find and deliver to customers abroad, the sky's the limit, right? You can make a lot of money as a business. I had mentioned a couple of the resources. I won't really go through this slide, but just in speaking about the amount of support that's out there, here's just a few that pop up that you could have direct access to immediately, that help with everything from your financing to grant money to helping you understand how your business will change if you take on international customers. A really supportive network. All of these organizations work together. We actually are New Mexico's partner, the official New Mexico partner for the U.S. Export-Import Bank. So any of the services that they provide, we're a conduit to make those connections. So if you ever have any questions at all about what resources are available or where you could get help, reach out to us. And if we can't help you, we for sure know who can. So global trends, all of you are paying attention to this. I imagine you guys are also talking about it in this class. What we've been seeing, and this is well before COVID, at the point that so much US manufacturing had been offshored to China in particular, there was a very, very significant cost difference in labor that made all of the other parts that aren't so great about trying to do your manufacturing in China, as in Asia, but in China in particular, worth it. Can anybody tell me a few of the challenges that you would have in outsourcing your manufacturing to China?
Learning how to speak the language.
Okay, so obvious cultural differences and issues, right? Beginning with the language. What else on the business end?
Intellectual property, potential loss of that.
Yep, intellectual property for tech companies in particular, really rough. What else?
There's also a reputational risk to businesses, especially right now.
Reputational risk, even down to, for Chinese products were considered to be less quality, right? So have you sacrificed the quality of your product by manufacturing it abroad? What else?
Cost of transportation.
Cost of transportation, right? Not only cost, but what about lead time, right? If you're having to ship it across the world, you're lucky if it's taking 2 weeks to get here. So all of those things, all of those factors, when you add them up, it's almost like, why would you even bother? But that's how significant the savings were in the cost of labor. Well, today, if you were to look at Mexico as an example, 15 years ago, the difference in the cost of labor, even between Mexico and China, was about 30%. So you think about 30% savings on the cost of labor, even trying to consider offshoring to Mexico. It just wasn't even close, couldn't compare to China. Well, today it's because of the growth of the Chinese economy and the sophistication of the Chinese economy, wages, the difference is less than 9% between Mexico and China. So now when you start thinking about all those other things, right, the cost of transportation, the lead times, the cultural differences, quality control issues, the stress between foreign relations between the United States and China, 9% now is not quite worth it, right? And so even before COVID, you've been seeing a significant shift in manufacturing coming back to the U.S. if it's feasible, right? A lot of times it's feasible because advancements and innovations in the manufacturing process, automation, those are ways that they've been able to bring it back. But for those that are just still cost too labor intensive, Mexico has really benefited from this trend over the last almost decade now. The U.S., of course, also has COVID introduced a whole new level of complication. When China shut down, we didn't feel those effects immediately because, of course, they had stockpiles of inventory that would last for a certain period of time. It just so happened that China also produced extra around the time of Chinese New Year because everybody goes on vacation. That's the one time you go on vacation a year is for Chinese New Year. So they had extra inventory even. So it took a couple of months for that hole in the supply chain to make itself apparent. Additionally, so many of the companies that had the ability to switch over and manufacture PPE did so. Because of COVID, simultaneously, shipping routes were cut all over the world, even more greatly constricting the ability to transport your product back to the U.S. What was available was being bought up by every government in the world, trying to secure space to be able to put PPE on it and get it to their countries. At one point, I was talking to a local customs broker who was telling me that the airlines were auctioning off belly cargo space in their airplanes, no longer even going through a process of first come, first serve, whatever customer is currently at the table. They literally let people bid on the space on their planes. So very chaotic time. We here saw an immediate shift in the needs of our companies. A lot of issues with supply chain, Chinese manufacturers that had just disappeared overnight, difficulties getting their stuff here, not knowing when it would come. And then, of course, a lot of interest from those companies in trying to identify alternative suppliers, hopefully in Mexico. So our Mexico City office has actually been working in this area now as well, trying to help provide those types of solutions. But it's something that woke a lot of companies up, and something that it's probably one of the points that they do a really good job teaching you in business school is mitigating risk. And many companies find a supplier, it's the right price, they love it, and it works until COVID-19 hits, and you don't have any backup suppliers. You haven't even considered how you would handle such an emergency, and now they're paying the price. We had a local company here that manufactures a cream of sorts, a cosmetic cream, who had $1 million order that they couldn't fill because they couldn't get the plastic containers that they put their cream in from China. They're literally not able to fulfill $1 million order in the middle of an economic crisis because they couldn't get their product. So the shift in how companies are going to address their supply chain is something that is going to be very significant in the next coming months and even next few years. We actually are going to have a seminar coming up here. Celeste, when is it exactly?
It's next Thursday, September 24th at 11 a.m. We're going to have the International Supply Chain Management webinar. It's going to include Randy as well as Oscar Quiñones, CEO of Global Supply Chain Consultants. He has worked in supply chain and sourcing for over 15 years. And the other speaker is going to be Jennifer Sinsabach from the New Mexico Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And if any of you guys are interested, I'm more than happy to provide a Zoom link to the chat. I'll do that.
Cool, awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's our webinars are free. Anybody who wants to participate, it'll be an interesting conversation about how to do a better job of mitigating risk moving into the future. On top of all that, we currently have a trade war going on between the U.S. and China. That is not helping the situation. And you have China now implementing strategies to try and stop this flight of capital and manufacturers that's leaving the country, including enforcing labor contracts to make it really expensive for companies to cut their contracts with their employees and leave, not allowing equipment and capital to leave the country. It's just really a fascinating time right now with Asia, with China in particular. Mexico is, and I would say was until recently, really Latin America's shining star. The economy was doing fantastic. They were benefiting significantly from all of that nearshoring that was coming back from Asia. They had major plans in the works to even compete with the U.S. Transportation cargo network, knowing that our deep sea ports had lacked investment for decades and were very congested. They were working on trying to figure out how to lure all of that cargo to come into Mexican ports for distribution up through the border to their final destination in the U.S. in a way that was faster and more efficient and less expensive. Currently, the current administration in Mexico has created some political risk. No one is quite sure what direction this economy is going to take, and is not confident that it is going to continue in the direction that it was. But should Mexico get back on course, it is very likely that Mexico would surpass Brazil to be Latin America's strongest and most important economy. We talked about nearshoring and reshoring. Does anybody have any questions or something they'd like to add to kind of these general global trends? Okay. Now,
I have
Oh, no,
sorry.
please go ahead.
So I was just thinking, I was talking with a local business development specialist at UNM Los Alamos about an idea I had, and he had mentioned United Arab Emirates. And I was wondering if we do much exporting to that area of the world, or if you have any experience in doing that.
so we do not do a whole lot of business with the Middle East. There was a period of time where when government budgets were better, that we actually had a Middle East trade office that would support companies in various countries throughout the Middle East. Well, from what we have seen, it tends to typically be Israel and Dubai, where you see most of the business happening. We have some good connections out there. In fact, Celeste and I just had a conference call with a customs brokerage and freight forwarding company out in Dubai that we're going to be organizing a Doing Business in the Middle East seminar actually coming up here together. They're going to do the presentation for us. So if that's something you're interested in, I could share that with Dr. Montoya, and he could send you that link.
Please do.
I will say there's lots of opportunity there. There's some weird nuances that sometimes are challenges for companies. One is that there's a lot of government restrictions about how their companies are allowed to interact internationally. And so for a US company to sell in most of the Middle Eastern countries, you're required to have a local partner in those countries. And the government says that the reason why is because there needs to be somebody local who's accountable should something go wrong, it's a bad product, somebody gets hurt, whatever it might be. It's a accountability issue. We tend on our end to see it more as an opportunity to generate a business opportunity for as many of their companies as they possibly can. So that's typically what we've seen as the biggest challenge our companies face. You're kind of forced to lock yourself into a partner, and if you don't find the right partner, you typically have a term on that relationship, and it could lead to several years of not getting the service that you want it to. So it's definitely one that I think if you are interested in, that you take the time and do the due diligence to figure out what that would look like and who your partner would be, because we have seen some frustration on that in the past. Digging into regional trends, we kind of talked globally, now kind of looking towards the US-Mexico border region. This is an astonishingly significant region in the world. And not just globally, but even for our two countries, the importance of the border states is gigantic. The 6 Mexican border states make up about 25% of Mexico's total GDP. Our 4 border states make up about 25% of the US GDP. And that makes sense, right? When you think about powerhouses like California and Texas like being contributors to those numbers. Arizona is also significant. New Mexico doesn't really have a very large manufacturing base, so we're kind of the super baby of that group of four. Of all of the exports that go out of the U.S. border region, the 4 U.S. states, we make up 0.25% of that. That gives you an idea of the significance of the exports that are going out, particularly out of California and Texas, but Arizona also has grown quite a bit. If you were to take all 10 of those states, right, the 4 U.S. states and the 6 Mexican states, and you were to create a new country, you would basically create the 3rd or the 4th largest country in the entire world, California, in terms of GDP. California now, I think, recently just moved in itself as the 5th largest economy in the world as a state. So this region and the relationships that exist here and the trade that goes back and forth is extremely, extremely important. And one of our goals is to try and see New Mexico maybe have a little bit more of a share of that than the 0.25% that it has right now. If you look at our exports from at the state level, we're about let's see here. Let me go back. This is more of the breakdown of our individual exports. Let's see. So we're about $4.7 billion worth of exports that go out of New Mexico. The vast majority of it are computer and electronic products. Who can guess what that is?
Cell phones.
Intel.
Yeah.
Intel, right? Intel is probably the biggest player within the state in terms of exports in that category. But there's also a significant amount of exports that are now going through the port of entry in southern New Mexico to a Foxconn plant, which I'll talk about here in just a few minutes, that are making up a good amount of that number as well. So how many people are familiar with Santa Teresa? I guess it's hard. I can't see a show of hands. See, I'm totally not good at the Zoom stuff, Dr. Montoya. I do better when I can see the people in the classroom.
That's all right. There's quite a few hands that came up.
Okay, great. This every year there's more people that have heard of it. It's really become something that is a significant economic development opportunity for the state. And basically what it is a community and a port of entry that's about 20 minutes west of El Paso, Texas. And it was designed to initially to serve as a relief route around El Paso, Juarez, because those two cities had grown so much that the non-commercial traffic and congestion that was there was literally killing the cargo and the freight and the commerce that was going back and forth on a daily basis. I mean, at one point, the rail that goes through El Paso into Juarez and vice versa was shut down only to operate in the middle of the night because of the danger it was causing to the public during the day. Well, you can imagine that when shippers have their stuff stuck at a port for 24 hours at a time waiting for an opportunity to cross, they're not going to cross at that port anymore. They're going to follow the path of least resistance and figure out other places to go. So recognizing that if they did not fix the situation, that there was the potential that they could lose the significance of that commercial crossing, the Santa Teresa strategy emerged. It's been going on for about 30 years, although the last 15 years or so, it's really accelerated. If you look at the map on the right side, you can kind of see a little bit closer. I think I've got another map on the next page. Yeah, much better. That shows what this region looks like. Can you see my cursor as well, or?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you can see Santa Teresa is right here. You can see how close it is to Texas. It's practically a suburb of Texas, of El Paso. There was nothing here. This was just giant desert here on their side, desert on our side. And what they did was they built this bypass road here that would go through, and on the Mexican side, actually constructed an international beltway out in the middle of nowhere to connect our port of entry all the way down to merge to the main highway that then goes down to Chihuahua City. So you can see how it's effectively bypassed Juarez, El Paso altogether. Since that move has been made, an opportunity was created for industry to want to locate there because they now had the opportunity to escape the congested Juarez El Paso metro area. And so you saw the development of the Santa Teresa Industrial Park, which now has multiple multinational companies who have set up manufacturing and distribution operators there. On the Mexican side, they landed a very, very, very significant investment from a company called Foxconn. Who knows about Foxconn?
It's Apple's manufacturer.
Okay, what else do you know about it?
They have really interesting issues in China.
Oh, yeah. Are you going to do international business or diplomacy? Very well handled.
Yeah,
Not
the best working conditions, I'll say, in China.
Yeah, that's right. Was there anybody else that was going to say something? I thought I saw something pop up. Okay. So Foxconn is a gigantic Taiwanese company that was primarily focused on doing all of its manufacturing in China. They have a factory that was notable, which is the same factory that had the issues that you were alluding to, that has 200,000 employees in Shenzhen, China. The city of Rio Rancho has less than 100,000 people, or around 100,000 people. This is one factory that had 200,000 employees. The plant manager was basically the mayor of what we would consider like a decent-sized small town. The issues that they had with that particular location, some of you remember maybe hearing on the news, at one point they were constructing suicide nets around the buildings to stop people from killing themselves because they were in such awful working conditions. But an awful story, but interesting in that those issues and the ability to maintain those types of conditions in China, and whether or not that would translate into an investment in Mexico, was actually something that arose as part of the history of that project in Mexico. But in following that trend that we talked about earlier, the nearshoring trend, it gives you a good example of how significant this trend is, where you see basically one of the most successful companies in the world at capturing offshored manufacturing from the United States and turning it into a gigantic business. They themselves deciding that it was important for them to make an investment in manufacturing in Mexico, close to the United States. That particular facility at full, it's kind of a every year growing more and more, but at full capacity, it'll be 14 fabs, and it will be the largest manufacturing facility in the entire Western Hemisphere, located a stone's throw from the New Mexico border. Very, very significant operation. Going back to the challenges in and how they were treating their labor, just a short anecdote. When they set up, a lot of people were wondering how that would go. And sure enough, there were some shenanigans that started relatively early on. They actually they had to build a loop road here, because even though they had this international beltway, they didn't even have a road to be able to connect the workforce in Juarez to get to the plant here. So they had to build a road to connect the industrial park here in San Jeronimo. So obviously these are low-wage employees. They don't have cars, so they rely on public transportation to get there. There was none. So Foxconn was providing buses to come back and forth to pick up people for their shifts. Well, one day, all of a sudden, the buses started showing up late to pick people up to take them home. And so employees were told, well, don't worry about it. The buses will be here. Just keep working. And then when the buses get here, we'll let you know. Well, it didn't take too many days of the buses not showing up on time before the Mexican workforce burned down the cafeteria of the manufacturing facility. And since then, labor relations and the treatment of the employees has been much, much, much better. So it's a really interesting observation and the cultural differences that could allow for a company to maintain those types of practices for indefinitely in one market, where in another they might not be tolerated at all. Any questions about kind of that initial story of Santa Teresa or of the port of entry?
Just an interesting interjection as well. It's their, what is it, a 1 million acre facility that is, I mean, not million square foot facility is also largely responsible for a lot of processing of asylum cases right now. And that's a very interesting social dimension of what happens when you have a large company like that on the border. Yeah.
Additionally, I mean, if you're going to dig into, all these other issues that go along with trying to create, from an economic development perspective, this is a big deal, right? You're creating an opportunity to grow industry in New Mexico. You're doing it in partnership with a foreign state below, who's also benefiting from it. But beyond that, there's water issues. This area of the border here sits above an aquifer, right? There's no wall that you can build in the middle of an aquifer. So there's no rules about who draws how much money or money, sorry, water, almost the same thing these days. How much water is drawn. Water rights are a gigantic issue, the depletion of water without protection. You can imagine you can't really enforce anything because you're dealing with two different federal governments. Border security, this issue over here, this area over here in Juarez is the area where I don't know if you're familiar with the story of all of the Mexican women that have gone missing. Very close. It's the first part of Juarez that you get to on that road from the San Jeronimo industrial park. So there's some danger issues there, but there's a lot of complicated aspects to what on paper appears just to be a really great economic development opportunity. Because of that port of entry, our exports, aside from what we've been doing with Intel, our exports have grown significantly. And a lot of that has to do with the companies that have been setting up there in Santa Teresa and are shipping into Mexico. But also, that Foxconn plant itself receives a ton of parts and components from the U.S. to build the computers that they're manufacturing there. I think they're doing Dell computers at that particular plant. So if you look at the chart from what we were doing, and as far back as 1999, we were kind of just trucking along, and then over the last decade, as that port of entry has grown and Foxconn has grown, you can see how significant our exports to Mexico have increased.
What year was it that we were marked by the New York Times as the #1 fastest growing exporter in the United States?
That would have been, let's see, probably like 2016, I think.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. And the bulk of that came from, it's hard. We could get into a whole nother conversation about the export numbers are not good ways to indicators to understand an economy, because there's a lot of things that are tabulated weirdly, or we get credit or don't get credit for. So that particular one, I think, was mostly because the Intel plant in Albuquerque had sent a ton of equipment to their plant in Israel, and they got classified as an export. So we had this gigantic jump in exports to Israel, like randomly. So even though we got the acknowledgement we're not exactly sure how much of it was really new organic exports, and what of it was just an equipment shift from Intel. One last thing I'll mention that was a game changer really in the Santa Teresa region was an investment by Union Pacific Railroad putting an intermodal facility there. This was a $400 million private investment in southern New Mexico. Probably one of the largest private sector investments in infrastructure in a decade in the whole country, to serve their sunset line of stuff coming in from the port of Long Beach, coming in through into Texas, and for distribution throughout the country. And that's another reason why you're seeing growth of industry around Santa Teresa, because not only do you have a relatively new and expanded port of entry, but you've got infrastructure like a full-blown intermodal facility there as well. What the state is hoping to do, and it's still kind of a long shot, is the state wants to do what they did with this road diversion, and they want to take this Bnsf line here, this rail line that it actually originates in Albuquerque. It kind of crosses into Texas towards around Hatch, and then works its way down and then crosses into Juarez through El Paso, but it originates in Albuquerque. They want to take this around Hatch and then redirect it so that that rail would then also come down through here. So you would effectively bypass both truck and rail through the Santa Teresa port of entry. Now, obviously, the state is really excited about that, because even more so than truck cargo, if you're a business that needs rail and you're on a spur, you move where the rail goes. You have no choice. So if you were to make that happen, it would be an instant shift in a ton of industry from where it's currently at in El Paso over to the New Mexico side. I don't have a lot of hope that will happen, because there's a lot of politics, and I see why we want it. I don't see why BNSF would necessarily make that investment, but it's something that the state's been working hard for. Am I running out of time, Dr. Montoya?
You have about 6 minutes.
Okay. So real quick, when it comes to trade, because of all those exciting things that have been happening in Santa Teresa, all of the discussion of trade tends to revolve around Santa Teresa and southern New Mexico. And what we're working on now is to really get people to understand that Albuquerque has a significant opportunity and significant play in trade if it wants to, and if it focuses on that as an economic development strategy. We're not necessarily much farther from the border than San Antonio is from the border, yet San Antonio has absolutely benefited from an economy that was created through binational opportunities in industry with Mexico. So we'd like to see more of that happen in Albuquerque. Here on this map, you can see Phoenix as an example. You look at Phoenix's rail and road infrastructure, right? You basically have one way in, one way out, east-west. Compare that to the transportation infrastructure that you see in Albuquerque, right? Right off the bat, there's more assets to be utilized in Albuquerque than other markets like Phoenix, which have been able to do a lot with a lot less. Our two interstates that intersect here are extremely important, right? Like for those of us that haven't, I should say for those of us that have lived other places or traveled other places that have seen traffic, we chuckle to ourselves when somebody complains about how bad traffic was in Albuquerque, or, oh dear God, it took me almost 20 minutes to get to work today. That's because we fortunately are situated at the intersection of two of the longest arterials in the country. I-40 connects the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, and of course I-25 Mexico all the way up to Canada. If you look at our rail network, this is the BNSF rail network, or their major lines, the Transcon line. You look at where we lie. I love this. Maps are so amazing, because as you zoom out, you get a different appreciation for our location, right? We kind of feel like we're out in the middle of nowhere, or not necessarily connected to anywhere. you look at this map and you bring Mexico into the equation, and we are perfectly centralized right in the middle of the Southwest with direct rail access. That was the rail I told you the state wanted to move from Albuquerque all the way down into central Mexico. And we sit equidistant along the rail line between the Port of Houston and the Port of Los Angeles. Port of Los Angeles connecting the US to Asia, a Port of Houston connecting the US to Europe and to South America. We are equidistant from those two ports with obvious abilities to distribute into the country's heartland. This is an old map, but it's still true. This is a density flow map showing if the rail line and the Bnsf network made it on this map, it's because there's enough daily use, enough trains that are on it. The line that goes through Albuquerque is the most heavily utilized rail line in the entire country. The reason that it is so is because it is the direct connection between the Port of Los Angeles and the inland port of Chicago. We also happen to have a fueling facility, the second most important, largest fueling facility in the country in Belen, where the trains are already stopping here, which we could do a much better job at trying to see how we could take advantage of idle time that trains have, because the one thing train companies don't want rail companies don't want is to stop trains. So when they are stopped, they want to do everything they can when they're stopped. There is advancement in this area. People are starting to see these opportunities. Right now, under construction is our first large-scale industrial rail-served park that's coming up outside of Los Lunas. This particular park, people wonder, if you remember, oh, why didn't we get Tesla? Why don't we get this? Why don't we get that? A lot of these companies are looking for a large industrial park that has rail service. Well, technically before this one here that's under construction, we didn't have that. And you can't promise to build one and have a company wait around for a year before they choose to occupy it. So this will create some immediate infrastructure that will be around for those types of companies that are looking for it in the future. We have a foreign trade zone in Albuquerque. Any company that operates in Valencia, Bernalillo County, we even got Santa Fe in there. Any company within the yellow on this map can utilize the foreign trade zone and benefit from avoiding tariffs on imports as part of their manufacturing process. We could have a whole nother call about what an FTZ is and its usefulness, but it is also an important tool for those reshoring companies that still have a lot of supplies and strong supply chains from other parts of the world that are in for a rude awakening now that they're going to have to import their parts and components directly into the U.S. and realize that there's tariffs associated that they didn't have to deal with when they were manufacturing abroad. So that's a key asset that we need and that we have. And that's kind of it, Dr. Montoya, for the discussion about trade in New Mexico and stuff that's happening. I've got some other stuff that's just kind of anecdotal, but we're kind of out of time. So if you have
Thank
anything
you very much,
to
Randy. Yeah, I could hear you. It's a clinic. What you do and what New Mexico Trade Alliance does is a clinic on. That's exactly what you provide to the state. But the wealth of knowledge that you guys are generating is essential for us to actually be sustainable in the global economy. So thank you so much. I know that we're short on time now, but the New Mexico Trade Alliance is a good partner, and I do encourage you guys, if you can attend the webinars, please do so. They have several posted often, and I'll make sure that you guys always have information to access those webinars. But yeah, it's terrible that we don't have all the time in the world, but I appreciate the time that you guys have given to us. Thank you, Randy, and thank you, Celeste.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. What we're going to do, and please give a round of applause to Randy and Celeste, and thank you so much. We'll make sure that the recordings are available, and that's our partners, Global Ties, are going to make sure that that's posted on the website. We're memorializing all of this, so it's a really good way for us to keep moving and building off of these conversations. I know that Karen Converse is on the call now, and she's ready to have a conversation now about Los Poblanos and some of the supply chain challenges that they had during COVID-19 and how they innovated off of that. What we're going to do though is take a 5-minute break so that you guys can get some water, use the restroom, and then we'll get right to Karen's conversation. Thank you guys. And we are live. So thanks again. This is leg 4 of this afternoon's programming. And actually everything has tied together quite nicely. You